Would you rather be at war with yourself and at peace with the world, or at peace with yourself, even if it means being at war with the world? Think about that for a moment. Let it settle. There is no simple answer. For a long time, you knew how to keep things calm. You knew the rhythm of the world around you, and you learned how to move with it. It was not about being fake. It was about functioning. You knew how to cooperate, how to adjust your position just enough to fit. You learned which words created friction and which ones smoothed it over. You became an expert at maintaining the peace. On the surface, everything looked fine. You were a part of things. You belonged. Life felt manageable, predictable. But underneath that calm surface, something felt tight. A kind of quiet compression, hard to name, hard to point to. It was not a crisis. You were not collapsing or breaking down. You were coping, managing, getting by. Most people call that success. You might have even called it that yourself. But you carried this feeling, a subtle weight you could not put down. You told yourself it was normal. This is just what it means to be an adult, to be responsible. You fit in, you were accepted, and that was the reward. The world was at peace with you. But you had a quiet, nagging suspicion that you were not entirely at peace with yourself. It was a small price to pay, or so it seemed. A tiny compromise made 1,000 times over, until the cost started to add up in ways you could not ignore. Then the friction began. Not a loud, sudden conflict, but a slow, grinding dissonance. The space between what you truly felt and what you actually did started to widen. The words you said and the truth you held inside began to feel like they belonged to two different people. Saying yes when you meant no started to take a noticeable amount of energy. Agreeing just to keep the peace began to feel exhausting. The silence you used to keep conflict at bay started to feel heavier than the disagreement you were avoiding. The world, of course, continued to reward you for adapting. It praised your flexibility, your easygoing nature. It gave you approval for not making waves, and that made it all the more confusing. Why did the rewards feel so hollow? Why did the praise feel like it was for a person you were only pretending to be? The old explanations you once leaned on started to crumble. The idea that this is just how life works no longer brought you any comfort. The belief that everyone has to compromise started to sound like an excuse. The thought that it's not that serious felt like a lie you were telling yourself to avoid a much deeper truth. Something inside you began to gently, but firmly, resist. It was not a rebellion. It was a quiet refusal. A refusal to keep splitting yourself in two. You were being pulled in one direction by the world's expectations, and in another by a part of yourself that was tired of bending. This friction was not a sign that you were broken. It was a sign that you were starting to wake up. And so, the real process began. This is the slow part, the quiet part, the part with no audience and no applause. You started to ask yourself a fundamental question. Is a peace that costs you yourself truly peace at all? You started to notice, really notice, how often you edited your own thoughts before they ever became words. You saw the subtle ways you softened your tone, adjusted your posture, or held back a piece of your presence just to make someone else more comfortable. You became an observer of your own compromises. You felt the powerful gravity of comfort, the pull to just go back to the way things were, to stop questioning, to simply belong again. But alongside it, you felt an even stronger need. The need to be honest. Not brutally honest with the world, but quietly, relentlessly honest with yourself. So you slowed down. You started to speak less. You listened more. Not just to others, but to that quiet voice inside you that you had been tuning out for so long. And as you began to stand more firmly in your own truth, you started to see how the world responds when someone does not bend so easily. It was not a violent reaction. It was more subtle, more persistent. There was pressure to conform, quiet ridicule dressed up as a joke. There were attempts to control the situation, to minimize what you were feeling, to explain your own experience back to you. They were not trying to hurt you. They were trying to pull you back into alignment with them, back into the predictable shape they were used to. In this process, you saw something crucial. You saw your own role in it all. You saw how much of your own truth you had willingly betrayed just to feel a sense of belonging. You saw how much internal conflict you had created by constantly avoiding external conflict. You realized, with a clarity that was both difficult and liberating, that you had been at war with yourself for a very, very long time, all in the name of keeping an external peace. There were no shortcuts here, no dramatic rebellion, no sudden surge of courage, just the slow, steady, and often uncomfortable process of reclaiming yourself, one small, honest moment at a time. This leads not to a victory, but to a recognition you can no longer unsee. You understand now that the world prefers you when you are predictable, when you are easy to categorize and manage. You see that your alignment with your own self makes you harder for others to control, and you realize that what feels like inner peace to you can often look like conflict to others. They see you changing the terms of the agreement without their permission. The choice is finally clear. It was always there, but now you see it without the fog of confusion or self-doubt. The war with yourself, the one fought in silence, feels quiet on the outside, but it erodes you from within. The peace with yourself, the one that requires you to stand in your own truth, can feel disruptive to the world around you, but it is the only thing that keeps you intact. You are not looking for fights. You are not trying to create chaos. You simply accept that standing your ground may cause the ground to shake a little. You know, in a place deeper than words, that shrinking yourself is no longer an option. It no longer feels safe. It no longer feels right. And so you return. You are still in the world, the same world as before, but you move through it differently. You move with a cleaner energy. You find yourself arguing less because you are no longer trying to win. You explain yourself less because you no longer need external validation for your own truth. You simply stand where you are. The world may still push. It may pull. It will test you to see if the old buttons still work. But you do not harden in response. You do not become defensive or provocative. You just stay aligned. You are not fighting back. You are simply no longer participating in the fight against yourself. You know what is happening now, and that knowledge is its own kind of stability. Even if the path ahead is still unfolding, even if you are still learning what it means to live this way, this is not rebellion. This is alignment.